Hello, today I am going to talk about the historical background of the book Refugee by Alan Gratz. The book Refugee is about three children who had to flee their country in order to go to a safer place. But why are these people refugees? What happened in their countries? That is what I am going to explain to you. Listen carefully, you will have to be able to answer 5 questions afterwards. First up, Joseph. Joseph and his family were refugees due to their religious preferences. They were Jews. They lived during the Second World War. He and his family lived in Germany. That is a red dot on the map. But why did Jews have to flee? Well, due to the growth of Nazism and its anti-Semitic ideology, which means the discrimination and hate against Jews, the Jewish community was severely maltreated during the Second World War, and Hitler became an important political figure with a lot of power in Germany. From 1933 onwards, the persecution of Jews became an active Nazi policy. In 1936, Jews were banned from participating in education, politics, and people needed to start wearing the Jew star. So, a lot of rights were taken from them. The story of Joseph starts with Kristallnacht, but what is Kristallnacht? This happened in the night of November 9th to 10th, 1938. Jewish shops and offices were smashed and vandalized. The increasing anti-Semitism prompted a wave of Jewish mass immigration from Germany during the 30s. The remaining community were to be deported to ghettos and ultimately to death camps. Luckily for Joseph and his family, they were able to flee the country by boat, the St. Louis. On May 13th, the St. Louis sailed from Hamburg to Havana, Cuba. 937 people were on the boat, almost all of Jews fleeing Germany. Due to political issues in Cuba, the boat could not harbor in Havana. After being rejected, the St. Louis sailed for Miami. However, the White House President Franklin D. Roosevelt decided not to take extraordinary measures to permit the refugees to enter the United States. So, the St. Louis sailed back for Europe, where 4 European countries each took in 230 people. These countries were Great Britain, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Next up, Isabel. Isabel and her family are refugees as well. She is from Havana, Cuba. She fled her country by boat together with her family and one other family during the Cuban exodus in 1994. But what was the situation in Cuba? Why did they have to leave? Well, the person in the picture is Fidel Castro. He was the president of Cuba from 1976 to 2008. He died in 2016. Castro was both loved and hated. Castro promised to restore the democracy, although he wanted to make it a socialist state. In short, that means that each and everybody would be equals, earn the same amount of money and get the same amount of food. But he was hated because he began to impose some radical reforms. Members of the previous government were shot, independent newspaper was shut down, and he admitted that he was holding political prisoners. Later, Cuba moved into the Soviet bloc, which was also socialistic. This caused a conflict between the US and Cuba. The US banned all exports from Cuba except for food and medicine. In 1993, Cuba lost the trade and subsidies from the former Soviet bloc. That, in combined with the long-term US blockade, caused Cuba into its most severe economic crisis. Due to this crisis, there was a lack of food, which caused a lot of internal conflicts with the people. A lot of people tried to escape the country in search of food and a safe place. In 1994, the Cuban president heightened the restrictions on leaving, which caused an exodus of more than 35,000 people. Exodus means a mass departure of people. Today's Cuba and Castro's Cuba are two whole different places. President Raúl Castro has restored the relations with the US in 2015. Lastly, Mahmud. Mahmud and his family are also refugees. Well, the city where Mahmud is from is called Aleppo. I'm sure you've heard of it in the news. Aleppo is a very important city in the Battle of the Syrian Wall. People have been fighting there for more than 7 years. But how did this war start? Well, in the so-called Arabic Spring that started the 18th of December 2010, there was a revolutionary wave. Both Tunisian and Egyptian presidents protested peacefully against the regime of the Syrian president, Assad. But the protests met with a violent crackdown by Assad. He tortured and murdered many civilians. This spurred further unrest in Syria. Protesters began to take up arms. In short, the conflicts are between, on the one hand, the pro-governmental troops, which are the regime forces by President Assad, and the rebel forces. But there are also some foreign countries such as Russia, Iran, and the US who are meddling the poll. But why is Aleppo so important? Well, Aleppo is the biggest urban rebel-held area, so it has a significant meaning in the war. It used to be a very beautiful city with a lot of economic growth and historical places, but due to bombings the city is almost completely destroyed. How is the situation now? Well, the war is far from over. There are still bombings and attacks every day. More than 500,000 people have been killed as a result of the war, and 4.8 million people have fled the country. Well, now that you know the historical and political background of the character's situation, you should be able to answer a few questions.